BAQC ESEA event. My name is Casey and I'll be the host for today. So today we are hosting our very first event as BAQC ESEA, and let's jump straight into an anecdote. As I was planning this event, I was talking to various people who are in this circle, and whenever we spoke, I realized everyone actually pronounced the acronym for East and Southeast Asians differently. Some people call it ESEA, some people call it EC, some people call it ESEA. And my personal preference is ESEA. So when you hear it, that's what I'm referring to, in case anyone had any doubts whatsoever. And so BAQC ESEA, what are we backing? Queer East and Southeast Asians. And what does it stand for? The whole acronym stands for British Asian Queer Community for East and Southeast Asians, to help us to get better visibility and representation, for us to meet each other, get to know each other, connect, and to know that there are other people like us. And for many of us growing up, we didn't have this environment, we didn't have such positive role models to look forward to. And I wanted to start this initiative to kind of help us to be the role models and to have people that we can look up to. And why did I want to do this? And I think for me personally, it goes into my own journey of being a queer Chinese woman. Growing up, I moved here when I was 9 from China, a big city where everyone looked like me. When I got to England, I was in a small town in this area where it was just predominantly white people. I didn't know any English at all. And I was thrown into school. There were maybe 3 other people who are of like Chinese heritage, either Hong Kong or mainland China. I went up to them and I just started speaking Chinese, and they just stared at me blankly and then ran away. So that was the first moment I realized, right, really need to learn English. And fast forward to the age of 13, I'm fluent in English now, and my mom's friend came over. This was the time of LimeWire and immediately downloading movies and sharing movies, right? So my mom's friend came over and she bought a CD with a list of movies, and on it was Saving Face. And I really, really liked the movie. I don't know if you guys have seen it. Yeah. So as a lesbian rom-com, I watched it probably, I don't know, 100 times or something. And I didn't know why I enjoyed it so much. I didn't have this language for gay, lesbian, homosexual in either English or Chinese. It just didn't exist in my vocabulary. And then as I started looking up like what the whole background is, what the story is, I learned of the language, and I knew the words gay and LGBT and queer, and I unfortunately also became aware of all the connotations that came with it. At this time, it was still very much, oh, ill, that's so gay. It was just not used in a positive way. And when I said 同性恋 to my family in China, I was told that it's an illness, you know, if you're gay, something's wrong with you. So that made me just bat away all of my feelings and any desire to explore it into this deep, deep, dark void. I think I only became comfortable with my sexuality when I was around 23, in my early 20s. I had already started working, and that was when I sort of became more comfortable. I really came to terms with it myself, but that took me 10 years, which I think is too long, really, that internal struggle that came with it. And then after a few years of being comfortable with it, I came up to my mom, who was my only family member in the UK. And I was so scared. I made sure that I had a house by then, so I had a roof over my head. I was a corporate lawyer at the time, so I had an income. And when I told her, I think I was expecting the absolute worst because I had all this preparation planned. But actually, she surprised me. It wasn't an overwhelmingly positive response, but she said, you know, like, I may never understand why you feel this way, but as long as you're happy, that's all that matters. We're still helping her to kind of understand more about bisexuality and like this community, but I was very happy with that. And I think that's why I'm so passionate about starting this initiative, because that struggle for me for decades, I want that not to happen to the younger generations, and I want people like us to know, if you had similar experiences, that you're not alone. I think for us as like ESEAs in the wider UK society, I think we face this very specific set of challenges. You know, we're battling against these still traditional beliefs that our families, maybe friends in the ESEA community have, and we're still underrepresented. We're still lacking in positive role models. They exist. I think we're just not as aware of them as we should be, and we're still being stereotyped every single day, positive or negative stereotyping. And I think we're still lacking in a queer East and Southeast Asian scene for us to kind of gather together and to celebrate ourselves and be comfortable and know that everyone in the room are comfortable with each other, and you know, we're here. And why ESEAs is also because we share similarities. We have all of these challenges based on the similarities that we have, the heritage that we have, the cultural values that we have. And of course, you guys have been discussing your similarities. Who was successful in coming up with 5? No one? Should we have a few? Did you?
Just one with I think we just studied politics and international relations. So specific, I know.
Wow.
I obviously had an interest in queer issues.
Yeah.
And I remember saying something like you were very punctual. But punctualness, I think, is also like a symbolism of our cultural values. I think growing up, we're taught you have to be on time, right? And then international relations, you have to study. These are very serious topics. And I think breaking away from that sometimes for people might be difficult. So yeah, that's the similarities and the challenges, and I hope with my initiative that I can help to pave the way for more recognition and more representation in the future. And as part of promoting queer East and Southeast Asians, I invited 3 individuals that I personally admire. David Kam, who is a movement artist, a yoga instructor, and the founder of kindredpacket, which for the longest time I thought was pronounced kindredpacket.
People talk about that.
Yeah, it's really cool. You have it in the small letter as well. So yeah, kindredpacket, which amazing. And Duong, who is an artist with a background in structural engineering, and he's held a number of solo exhibitions. You've also curated. And Sarah Cosgriff, who unfortunately couldn't come today due to positive COVID test. She identifies as asexual, and we'll find an opportunity for her to give us a talk in the future, because I think it's a very important thing to understand more about asexuality, which is known to be quite an invisible orientation on the spectrum. So I want to shine more spotlight on that as well. Sarah couldn't come, but she did send me a few paragraphs to pass on. So I'll read it out to everyone. She was very excited to come, and it's really unfortunate. So she says, I am asexual and queer, grew up in the UK with a father from Australia who was white and a mother who was from the Philippines. I'm very sad to be missing the first BAQC event, British Asian Queer Community. I was really looking forward to meeting you all. I grew up in a predominantly white area and did not have the tools and language to talk about race and racism and queerness until I was an adult. I also grew up without a Filipino community around me, and so as an adult I'm trying to catch up. I'm sure many will relate to the feeling like you're behind everyone else, and the shame you may feel for not knowing as much of the culture as you feel like you should. I wish everyone had a joyful event. If anyone would like to connect and talk with me, I would love that. I produce and present a podcast with my cousins called Queer Cuz, where we share our experiences as well as platform and highlight others, in which we have included interviews from queer Filipinos around the Philippines. The wonderful thing about our podcast is that it's about us as a family. It originally intended to be a podcast, so the audio isn't the best. Audio probably gets much better in the future episodes. Sarah had also been shortlisted for the National Diversity Awards, so an absolute amazing, generous person. Check her out. I have her details on the BAQC ESEA Instagram account. If you guys follow, you'll see it on one of the posts. So yes, without further ado, we'll start off with David, who... Being a movement artist, David will start us off with an embodiment workout first. It'll be about...
I was in the workout, but really I thought of sharing something that starts with the body because I'm personally quite an introvert, and I think sometimes coming to a space like this can be quite overwhelming when it's always words. So I'm hoping that we can start by just landing in our body. So right now I invite everyone to close their eyes. If you don't feel like doing that, you can also simply soften your gaze. And make sure you find a bit of connection with your feet to the ground so that you feel supported. And your hands can also be in contact maybe with your thighs or somewhere that makes you feel centered. Let the lips part, jaw softens. And take a full breath in. Breath out. We do this again. When you inhale, think about your head ballooning upwards. As you breathe out, feel your back against the chair. Just once more like that, but over and now keep this going in natural rhythm of your breath, but I'd like you to bring your attention towards your why. So what drew you to this event? What made you want to come? And maybe this is not resolved and it's just pure curiosity, and that's also fine. Let that be at the forefront of your mind. And allow that thought, that value, that word land in your body. If it is curiosity, what is it that you sense in your body that's expressing that? And with that in mind, we take another breath in. And a breath out. And in your own time, I invite you to just blink open your eyes and start using this time to have a look at all the different faces that are around this. I think it's quite special that we are all gathered here for this event. So just take a moment, no words, but just seeing each other's faces, acknowledging the different faces, the different outfits. That's it. Making sure, especially if you're at the front, and to not forget the people at the back, including the organizing team as well. Amazing. And with that, try and make 3 people laugh. I don't know what I'm going to do, but really try and find 3 people, whether it's a stare down at them, like a chuckle a little bit. Amazing. Alright, yeah, that's it. Very simple, so not a workout. More a landing.
In my head, I envisioned it as like standing up and like really expressive.
That shall come in like the subsequent events, I think.
Great. That was actually really helpful. I did get a bit nervous as I was talking, so I feel like it really helped me to relax as well.
Good.
So how did you get into yoga and being a movement artist?
Well, the first time I was asked to run in school, I just cried. My mom had to come over and make me run. But I think movement somehow found me accidentally, as I grew older. And in hindsight, I've realized how much that became my coping mechanism in dealing with my sexuality. I was raised in Malaysia, and so yeah, I don't know. I had 3 older brothers who are very straight, so that meant like I just stick out like a sore thumb. My best friend's my mom, and yeah, we just. Yeah, we are the main, people who just hang out. And yoga came into the picture when I knew I was coming to the UK to study. It's a very common thing in Malaysia. When you when you finish high school, you would send your kids away. For some reason, that's the the thing to do. It's usually in Australia because logistically it's closer. But for some reason, I was like, no, everyone's going down and go as far away as possible. So yeah, and when I knew that I was going to leave, I thought, oh my gosh, I'm really going to miss my mom, and I wanted to make sure that we have something to speak about, and something that we share in common. And also because I know she spends so much time with me that a part of me is that when I leave, what is she gonna do? Because all of the kids have grown up. So then I thought, okay, yeah, let's do this thing that I saw on the billboard outside of my house. Did it, really struggled, but then it became like the thing that kept us together over the years. Even when I was here, we just Skype each other and talk about that. She doesn't do any of that now because I have 2 nieces and she has reverted completely back to mom mode. And yeah, so no yoga for her, but yeah, I think that was how I started. And so when I did yoga in the UK, it was really the space where I was processing my emotions. I'm never one with words, so it doesn't help me to kind of, if people ask me, how are you feeling? I don't know. But even to this day, I don't know, but I know my body knows. So just going to places where I'm asked to hold a form or even just do certain movements just gave me that time to brew and just process the complexities of whatever it is that I'm feeling, and most of the times I just end up crying in class. And I think that's why I ended up pursuing dance professionally, because I'm really so drawn by the fact that if everything can be expressed by words, what is the point of movement? There really is something there that can be left unspoken and that can be explored. So yeah, I guess that's how movement found me, and that's what I'm continuing doing.
Expressing yourself through movement and body as opposed to words.
I guess it's a space where I don't feel judged. When I'm asked to just do certain things, I can just do it without having to explain myself.
Yeah.
And that is like the little pocket of freedom I could find in a day where I often feel like I'm looked at or judged upon in my choice of words in a way that I'm sure many of us would have experienced. My dad, kind of going, spread your elbows when you eat, at the table, or like take bigger steps. And I even remember like when I was 16 when I was doing all of that, and he was like, yeah, you've grown up to be such a man now. And I'm like, I think even now I still identify so much as a boy, because I think that's this like apprehension of like, I don't really want to address my sexuality, so I'll stay a kid as long as I can be Peter Pan,
The reacting to the pressures maybe from these societal values, or maybe these ideas that your dad is kind of imposing on you.
Yeah, and in terms of fight and flight, I'm definitely flight. So it's just like, okay, fly, ignore, and be numb.
Like run away in the middle of this?
Yeah, exactly.
So what kind of yoga do you specialize in? Because I know yoga comes into different sort of types.
Yeah, well, I started off doing a strand of yoga called rocket yoga, which is as hardcore as it sounds. So it's like inversions everywhere, and it's just like really just all on the body. And that's because I was coming into it from an angle of a professional dancer, and I needed some kind of safe but dynamic training to keep up with my lifestyle. And then from there, I'm really glad I started with that, because the essence of rocket is based off the most classical practice which is Ashtanga yoga, which is what we most commonly associate as the yoga that everyone knows. And the essence of rocket yoga is about play. And so that just gave me I felt like I was given the permission to really play around with how I can get people to move. And because, as a dancer, I always want to get people to dance about. So yoga really is a way for me to go, well, let's dance. I'm not going to tell you it's dance. I'm going to plant in a few like yoga postures and then slowly get people to dance. And then from there, I think the way my practice has evolved has been just to create a space for people to feel like they have the wild permission to just behave how they want. So really it's more like a drama class.
Yeah, I've seen on your just general branding and who you are as a person is a lot about curiosity and play, and also I see a lot of elegance and like it is like very artistry sort of movement. And I know you did architecture initially and then transitioned to dance and now yoga. And whilst for me I see it as breaking away, pursuing freedom, chasing your passions, is obviously something that Asian parents tend to frown upon, right? How did your parents react when you told them, I'm going to pursue yoga full time?
I think I really have to say I've really lucked out by being the youngest of four. And four sons as well. So it's like, great, yeah, my brothers can do all the traditional stuff and I feel like a bit more free to venture about, because by that time they were just like, okay, yeah, well, just do your thing. But they did shut me down, like, because my initial pitch was I want to be a fashion designer, and it's like, no, you're not going to do that. So that's how I honestly turned to architecture, which I really loved. But then that's kind of how I got into it. And in terms of how they responded when I guess effectively jumped ship was I think they were quite like, at that point I was a bit older as well, so I was very glad that they just chose to trust me, and they just went, if like, as long as you're happy, just do your thing. Because I guess I've been quite like a good boy from young, and if I've kind of brought something up like that to them, they know I would have considered it quite seriously. So that and I also gave them an ultimatum, because I said, okay, I'm going to take a 1 year gap year to dabble in dance, and I'll make sure if I were to continue it would be a scholarship, because I do not want them to fund a whole chunk of education again.
Wow.
So then thankfully that didn't work out, so then I just went on.
Nice. And obviously doing something you love is quite different from loving someone that you shouldn't, quotation marks, especially when it's still illegal in Malaysia, right? So how did you come to discover your sexuality? How did you know that you were gay?
I think I knew from very young, but what's interesting was my really young memories came back to me after I came out to myself, because it was so blocked from being in I don't know, just in Malaysia there's a lot of because I was a very good boy, I actually was.
So you keep saying.
Honestly, in high school it was like I was given a lot of stuff to a point where I was head boy, and so there were a lot of eyes on me to a point where I really feel like I cannot
fail them.
I cannot do any wrong steps, because I would be found out. So my biggest fear has always been I'd be caught out. And so all of the things that you said, I really relate, the connotations of it would be like the end of me if someone would be like, you're gay or something, because it would be like planting the seed, and because I think I've been hiding a lot behind my academic. I've been blessed to be able to fit within the way the education system works. So then with that, it's become like the armor that I just okay, I will just have to study hard and perform well, and no one's going to question everything else about me. And so when I came to the UK, I felt like, okay, no more eyes. I'm no one's no one knows me, so I can just explore a little bit. But then I think unfortunately, maybe 9 months into my first year, my friend from high school kind of outed me by just kind of literally asking me to my face, are you gay? I just had to be like, I don't know how to deal with this, because I don't think I'm mentally ready for this yet. But then it did accelerate my process, and okay, maybe this is it, because that was fresh from breaking up with my ex-girlfriend as well. And so it was a lot of soul-searching time, and I guess when I came out to myself, there was a lot of just asking, because immediately my head went to, how do I tell my family, and what now? How do I tell the people around me too? So then I just started reaching out to people that's outside of my circle, just to see if they could offer some advice, especially because like you said, I really went to worst case scenario. And I wasn't in a place where I could afford a house, so I had to mentally prepare myself. I'm like, okay, well, I could be kicked out, although I know my parents love me, but there is a very real chance. And also just being the baby of the family, I feel like, okay, when would they take me seriously? So it was just timing that, so I had to wait till I graduated to then go and bring up the question. And also just learning practicalities like, well, don't come up when you're driving and those kind of things. Yeah, like just making sure that they're in a safe space as well, and making sure that like I was just reading about how when you come out to your parents, they essentially have to go through a grieving process too. So just making sure that you give them that space, and also making sure that they have contacts of fellow like parents who have good kids as well. Because you know, like they're parents, so it's not like they can talk to you about all the things that they're feeling, because they must feel also like, well, what do I do as a parent now? And that's something that we can't do anything about unless they're other parents. So I came with a file.
Wow.
I was like, okay. Yeah, and even when I came out, I think my dad just laughed and kind of that, like he's like me, complete flight. So I told him, and he went up to have a shower, and I was like, oh, okay, then let me talk to my mom. And then my mom was just like tearing a little bit, and like she was just like, coming from a place of fear. But then in the end, she did say like, I'm just very glad that you felt like you could tell us, because I think they already kind of had an inkling, because like I said, like the many eyes on me, even like in the UK, there were rumors back, even when I didn't even date anyone. It's just like vicious, like literally Crazy Rich Asians stuff. So I was like, okay, great, so it was quite frustrating to know that I have to wait until I felt safe to come out, but knowing that still, things are gonna like go out, and not wanting my parents to feel like they to receive the news before I do that.
And so when did you start coming out to your parents?
I think probably 5-6 years ago. And I was very strategic because I brought my partner back first the year before, just a way for my parents to humanize him. And also, I think this is like where my personal values come in, because I feel like my partner has to kind of vibe well with my family before I become more serious. So then before we got too serious, I was like, hey, let's like come to Malaysia and like have
Did
fun.
you introduce him as your friend or your boyfriend?
Yeah, he's my special friend.
Best friend.
Because I think it worked out, because on my first year I have actually a friend I'm meeting after this event. He's just typical white British guy here that I just really grew close to, my architecture course mate, and he just came back with me to Malaysia. And that's just purely, we're just friends, and I was showing him around, so I was like, maybe I could just do the same and they wouldn't suspect. But obviously we were more chummy, like me and my partner, but then we tried to
stop not to show too much.
But it really worked out because they bonded. So we got more serious, and then the following year I said, okay, don't come back, and I'll I'll tell my parents. And I said, obviously it might be a lot for them to take in. So if they ask, then I will say that we're together. If not, then I will leave it to me and like slowly, add more truth bombs.
I see. Very strategic.
Got to
long-term plans.
Yeah, and it really helped because I think then like their relationship maintained, and he wasn't ever like a risk of being blamed at. Like he will never be that reason that I turned gay, or like, because there was even the conversation that don't go to the UK, like it's turned you. So I was very conscious of making sure that didn't happen.
So your dad ran away to the shower.
Went to the shower.
And your mum sat down, crying.
Quiet tears, and then just basically asked about sex, and I was
really?
like, don't worry, like in the most Asian way, like not to the details, but I was so worried about AIDS and so it was just a bit of sex education, which is non-existent in Malaysia really. So just a bit of that education, and then she's fine. It's just unfortunate because I think there were some negative experiences from my parents, just with like stories of sodomy with like their relatives and stuff. So then it's always been like, okay, this is a really bad thing. So like after a bit of education, she was fine.
Okay.
But then like that's the thing, that was like one instant. But then the years that followed was like a continuous coming up process, because like my dad, I think after a few days he then talked to me about it, but it was more like, well, have you tried going on with another girl maybe? Every year it's been, just basically parenting them, right? Like being the parent, you go like, okay, are we ready to talk about this yet? Are we ready to talk about this yet without shoving it in their face?
Yeah.
And then only this year we got to a place. I think COVID can't really help. I think it's really changed their perspective. So then this year I brought it up to them that we're thinking of getting married, and my dad for once just like, okay, yeah, you're grown up now. Do what feels right to you? And I'm really grateful, but it has taken like a good 7 years or so to get here.
And you've been with your partner now for 10
years next year. Yeah, which is we
What's-
feel anxious.
No,
Yeah.
I feel like it's more like a happily ever after. Like,
I don't know.
you met when you were at university and you're still together. 10 years is a very long-term relationship, you know? What's
Yeah, I'm
your
grateful.
secret to
That's definitely ups and downs. But no, there's definitely ups and downs, and we've definitely had like a fair few breaks here and there, and and I think that's the thing as well, like in terms of values, just being brought up, I don't know, just like being filial and what you see as a relationship. I think that's really kind of
And
Yeah.
having your values aligned and
Yeah.
wanting to be serious and wanting this to be having a real shot at forever, I guess.
And even the prospect of like fatherhood, right?
Yeah.
That took me a whole year to be like, okay, is this like planted in my head as something that I need to do, or I really want to do it? And it took me a while to go, actually, I genuinely want to do it. And I think with relationships as well, like it's something that we have been exploring, and I've mentioned it to you the last time we met as well. But we have been exploring open relationships just to see like what does that mean for us? And I think a lot of the times there's connotation that that basically means shit ton of steps, but really it's like I think it's a way of communicating, and we're just kind of now that we've been together for 10 years, is really looking at what that means and what longevity is as well.
And I guess it's like as part of exploring your relationship as well, and going a bit deeper
Totally.
in your relationship with your partner, and what's important to you, what you want to try, what you want to discover about yourself, and giving each other that space to do it.
Exactly.
And I think it's it's an incredibly brave thing to do, and that's kind of, I feel like that follows you, that pursuit of freedom. Like I feel like you're a very free soul. So.
Well, just again being the youngest helps.
And I guess since we're at Pride Month and all of that, what does Pride mean to you?
The word that comes up would be ownership, and I think that's what like in this past month I've been doing a lot of just like talks and works with so I mainly work with We Create Space, and if you haven't checked out that nonprofit, it's really worth checking out. It's a global platform for young queer leaders, and well, not even just young queer, just queer leaders in general. And they recently had a queer retreat as well, first of its kind, which is incredible, like just bringing all the leaders together. We Create Space, and they have been doing a lot of like corporate sessions and dissecting, like what pride is and what that could mean. And I think across all of that, the word that keeps coming up is ownership. Just taking ownership of your narrative and knowing that like I think when you feel completely in your body and in charge of your actions, then that essentially is pride.
And I think before we leave, could you tell us a bit more about kindredpacket and what that came about, and where do you see that going?
It's a very personal project that has accidentally become a non-profit. But it's because last year over Lunar New Year, I was just very homesick. We all couldn't go home to visit family to celebrate, and that's such a big thing, right? Like just having a reunion dinner with your family. So I just felt quite like depressed and dejected. And as a yoga teacher, I was like, okay, I'm just gonna hold like an online Zoom yoga class, and then we can just chat with the agents within my community. And then I felt like, I felt quite a bit of joy just organizing that. So I've just launched a call out for everyone else to host their own gatherings. Like even if it's just a private gathering, it's a way to just share joy and connect meaningfully with everyone else. And I think very personally what this project meant to me was because I was at a point where I've resented Malaysia for a long time, because I think I felt like acknowledging my queerness meant giving up on my relationship with Malaysia, and that's because it's a predominantly Muslim country. So I've come to terms that I really want to be a father, but there's no way I could start a family back home because we won't legally be acknowledged as parents, and I don't think if we have a kid there, we both can be on the paper as fathers. So then, little things like that made me quite resentful. But having spent 2 years with no option of going back home, and recognizing a lot of the more beautiful aspects of my relationship that I miss, and so kindredpacket was a way to reconnect with the East and Southeast Asian side of me that I've just kind of shut down so much having been here. I think, like I said, this personal thing became this nonprofit, and what I'm really looking into doing with the nonprofit right now is to try and decolonize wellness and pitch wellness that's more culturally sensitive, especially for the elderly and for young kids. And that's why I use the term red packets, because I just remember even when you receive a red packet from the auntie that you just don't really like, it's still very intimate, and it's still quite a sacred moment. and I like that, and I really hope to use that essence to kind of share with everyone what an exchange and what a gift could look like beyond the traditional form of money. So in conversing or just in moving together. Just events. So that's what we're doing. And this September is East and Southeast Asian Heritage Month. And I work with BAQC as well, the British East and Southeast Asian Network. And essentially this is our second year in basically a national heritage month where everything EC is happening, a lot of events is happening. And as a part of that, we're hoping to organize a wellness day. You're free to come by.
Let us know the dates and venue.
Will do,
Does anyone else have any questions for David?
It's not a question, it's a comment. I think you were mentioning about the whole thing where your parents... I'm from Indonesia, by the way. I'm half Chinese, half native Indonesian. The Chinese part is 7th generation. But roughly speaking, the cultural sphere is a bit Chinese. And I remember distinctly that my aunt, my aunts, my mother's relatives, when I was moving to London, I actually did get so I guess it's a warning, or basically saying that, be careful, because you're moving to London. A lot of people became gay when they go to London. I think it's Southeast Asia. It's a thing. I remember when I came up to my mom, that did come up, because she was trying to understand, is that, nurture versus nature?
Yes.
Did it happen? Is it but I think what made me really, in a way, made me really happy was my dad's there, and my dad was obviously, these people are gay, and then they go to London because they feel free to there. It's not the causation and the correlation, it's the other way around. So, but I think when you said it, I thought it was just my weird little family, but I think I heard it again and again.
I'm so sure as part of my very thick file, it's mentioned there that it's one of the most common things that as part of the grieving process that they will look for a factor to blame. It's just coping, right? So that it's either the person, if you're seeing someone, or the country, the place that you went. So it's quite unfortunate.
What my mom said was, it's the high education you got. Why are you all high educated people like this? I was like, what? I've never heard of that before. But
And I even remember because my dad's very sensible, very rational. That's the way he is. And when he came to being ready to talk to me, I remember he was saying, I'm so concerned now that you shared this, how is it going to impact your work? And then just kind of going down that route of I don't want you to be, blah, 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 blah. But then, there's just so many angles that, yeah, but it is inherently all just viewed as one whole thing, which is why, again, I go back to movement, because just words are not enough to process really how complex it is for us to navigate every day as a queer Asian, just, with microaggressions happening outside, but even just without that, because I feel sometimes it's quite hard to offend me just because I'm so slow, and if someone was open for literally 5 hours, they'd be like, oh, okay, that's just happened, and then I would have forgotten about it because I'm just quite chill generally. Yeah, but then even with that, sometimes I feel with back as when aggression is happening, I'm never really I'm that aware, but I'm still very in my head. So I deal with questions, and if you're like me, I feel like it is tiring, right? Every day to question yourself and be like, oh, is this appropriate? Is that right? Am I supposed to be like this or that? And that wears you down. And I think that's one of the more specific, things that we deal with as individuals. Also.
Yeah. I felt like for me, I became a lot better after I came out. I stopped asking a lot of the questions I don't care anymore.
Yes,
done. But, anyway, thank you for
answering
all my questions. So next we have KV, who is an artist with a background in structural engineering. And as I was prepping and reading up about you, I became more and more fascinated about your story and your life. I just think you embody so much of dualism in a way. So you're Chinese Vietnamese, but grew up in Canada, and you studied structural engineering and then transitioned to art full-time, self-taught.
Not full-time yet, but
yes. Self-taught artist. And in your art, you work on the theme of migration and the Vietnam War, kind of bringing the past into the present. And now you're out as a gay man, but you were in the closet, so to speak, for about 28 years. So with all of this, I just thought, wow, it's actually a lot embodied in one person. And I thought maybe we get to know you chronologically. Could you take us through how your parents came to Canada?
So we're ethnically Chinese, born in Vietnam. So even when we grew up, we weren't well off, but my parents had a private tutor to our what I call village. And as an adult, when I spoke to them, they did that because they thought they were insulating us from the Vietnamese community, which is really weird because we spoke Vietnamese as a kid to the people, but then we had the teacher come teach us Vietnamese and Chinese. And the reason why they didn't want us to go in the public Vietnamese school was they didn't want to be discriminated. So already growing up, I found a form of discrimination which I didn't know about. So my parents lived through the war. Both parties survived. And then my aunts and uncle from both sides were both refugee people. My aunt's side, so my mom's side were in Singapore for a few months, and then my dad's side were in the Brunei Island in Malaysia for a whole year before they relocated to Canada. And then in 1987, they sponsored us over to Canada. So I grew up with a Western upbringing, and then of course they were electricians and like homemaker, and then they just worked in the factory for the rest of their adult life. They're both retired now. My aunts were hair salon barbershop, so they did that in Canada. So we grew up, I guess in our community we assimilated to the Chinese community in Toronto. So then I lost my Vietnamese and I speak Cantonese to my parents. So there's already this, like, am I Chinese or am I Vietnamese? Actually I'm Canadian, but then and then
all three.
yeah. So now you're British. So when someone asks me what am I, it's really confusing. It's almost like Shen asked me what art do you do. That's also really confusing because you do a lot of things, and I think everyone here, we have such a diverse background to explain what we are, and then we're also queer. I don't remember what the question was.
We were actually actually answering the question I was going to ask you next. It was like if you ever had that internal conflict with your identity in terms of Vietnamese or Canadian and Cantonese, and I think you said you're kind of each of them and all of them at once, and we, again, like just so much diversity within you and within us as well. What brought you to London?
So I guess with most Asian people, we weren't able to study like fashion or art, unless you're already from a well-off family who can support that. So I studied structural engineering, my siblings studied arts and science and kinesiology, so both of my sister and brother are both teachers. So I studied engineering, which gave me the visa to come to the UK. This was 12 years ago. I think for me, coming as a gay person or a queer person, it was like, do you live in Toronto for the rest of your life because that's where your family happened to be? And I said, well, actually I have the freedom to pick, to choose. So I came on a 2-year working holiday visa, and then I loved it so much. And then I stayed. So this is like home. The transition to art, I think, because we don't have, I wouldn't say burden, but the social obligation of having kids, we can explore our passions more, because it's quite difficult if you, I know with my siblings and other people who are creatives, if you have kids, you almost have to put your second career on hold. So it's been 6 years going through this transition of becoming an artist. So that's I think it's like David, studying architecture for your parents, and then you eventually want to do something that really is your passion.
Yeah, you first do it for them and then you do it for yourself.
Yeah.
Cool. When did you realize that you wanted to explore more of the art side of you?
I think doing art in high school as well, the equivalent of A-levels, and then you thought, okay, well, I don't actually need to study art, do I? Actually you do, but then, when you're 18, 19, you study just the proper work, because you can't really self-teach engineering. I don't think so anyway. Of course you can, but it's quite difficult to do that. So okay, maybe, and then so that was like the default, but it was always in me to do. And I think I stayed in the closet for so long, and my social peer circle was like people from high school who were mostly Asian, but Caucasians as well, but they are of a professional background, and then you do engineering for 6 years, and then you work, so your peer circle is a bit boring. And then I came out, and then I realized there are so many alternative professions that make a living. This sounds really dumb, but I don't actually understand what people outside of lawyer, doctor, engineers do. It's like my partner is a client director. So having that exposure to the community gives you more accessibility to learn what the options are.
Yeah, and amidst all of this, when did you really come out to yourself? When did you realize that you were gay?
I was 13, and my brother was flipping through channels, and it was like a bodybuilding competition. It's like, something is happening now. And then you flip the leg up, and you flip back. It's like, so I was like, this is weird. But when I was 8, 9, I played with my neighbors. We were playing with Barbie dolls. I played G.I. Joe and stuff too. But sorry, these are very traditional, So it was then, and then the good thing about being in a very traditional Asian family is that they don't want you to date until you have an education. So I was insulated in that way to just study, and then suddenly I was 24 and finished my master's degree. Okay, you can date now. I'm like, thanks. So this is just pre-smartphone days, so it was very difficult to access who was around. So I didn't actually know many gay people at all, because in Toronto it's similar to London or major cities actually. The equivalent of Chinatown, Oxford Street and Old Compton Street was all within like a kilometer from each other. So when you're closeted, pre-iPhone, you're walking around, it's like, who am I going to meet? Like, you're getting outed. And this is like yourself, before having having income, like you don't want to get disowned, right? So that took me a long time to sort of face that. So my first experience was actually when I was 24, when I went to Ottawa for a conference, and that was like my first time like being away from the chains of your family. So that's when I started exploring. I did schooling at the University of Toronto, so I didn't have that outlet as well of going to boarding school. So it took a while to understand, to have the stability of finance, and then finally coming out. So I came out at 28 to my closest friends and then my siblings, and then I moved to London when I was 30, and then when I went back to Canada to renew my visa at 32, that's when I came out to my parents. I think by that point I had one nephew. There's like 4 nieces and nephew now. So that really helps to alleviate the pressure, because there's already like an offspring.
The family line's already been crossed.
Even though it was my sister's kid,
Oh, okay.
but still, at least there's like a grandkid in the family.
How did your parents take it? How did your family take it?
I think to date, it's still the most difficult thing that I've had to do in my life is to come out to my parents. And I know a lot of my friends, Asian friends particularly, they don't officially come out to their family. Sometimes they just live with someone and then they just like, oh, I've been living with X, Y. And then they come to your family gather. So it's just kind of like an unsaid thing. I think for me, I needed to say it. My dad actually took it really well. I think he grieved on his own. My mom cried a lot, but eventually I left after 2 months of the visa renewal, and then my siblings sort of took care of it. But we're all good now. So they have met my partner. We've stayed with each other, and then the kids love him, which helps with. If you ever need to bring a partner to your family, just get the kids to help him or her.
I'll write that down. And how does that show up in your work? How does that inspire you in terms of like working on art pieces?
I think as a self-taught artist, you have no rules, or you don't know of the rules to break. And I guess it's like if you're a singer-songwriter, you write about your experience. So for me, initially I was doing art about the migration experience, and the more I do it, the more I realize that the experience is quite unique of living in 3 distinct continents, but having all of these racial assimilation issues that is quite global regardless of the color of your hair or skin, and then also being a queer artist, so it's like a niche and then another niche over it. I think that if I had to look back at my younger self 20 years ago, I wish I had met someone like myself to have a role model. It's really important to be visible, just like Queer Britain here, like to be seen. This is for the queer community in the UK, to have representation of Asian people as doctors, lawyers, or in the artists, or whatever we're doing in this platform. I think it's really important. We don't know who we're affecting or influencing, but it's important to have that legacy so that people can reach out to us after the event to know that we exist.
Yeah, and I think so. When I went to the Queer Frontiers event that you curated and hosted, I said to you at the time as well, just even seeing your name, like a very East and Southeast Asian name on the wall, for me, like that provides so much comfort for me. So definitely, I think it does make a massive difference. So, how did you find the experience being someone who's queer and from Vietnam, growing up in Canada, breaking into the art industry? Was it a barrier, or was it less so in the art industry?
I think we, as a Southeast Asian community, have a lot to learn from the Black community. And I say that with the greatest respect that, you know, with the Black Lives Matter movement, it really raised their voice and strength. You know, for better or for worse, it took the murders of many people to bring that uprising. So being in the position of a curator and in the art world and just listening, when you're curating or brief in the exhibition that I helped to co-curate with Queer Frontiers, like LGBTQ+, we needed to have all of those aspects of that spectrum represented, which is very important to raise that visibility, but also a balance of female and male identifying and non-binary people. But the most important was like the racial diversity. And when, I don't know if you filled applications of BANG, it's like, it's now called global majority, but like it's the British Asian minorities. It's my experience, like they really say BANG, but what they mean is Black. And I think it's because the voice of the Black community is very strong. So when you have an exhibition, let's say of all male, all white, let's say you have 4 male white, people will be like, what is this exhibition? If you have 4 female, that is socially acceptable because we're trying to change the gender gap. But when you have even, like if you have a female Black artist on the board, it makes it accessible. And I wonder if that's because their voice is very strong. So what I'm trying to say is there a way we can make the Southeast Asian voice stronger? So to answer your question, the barrier of, I don't know if it's being queer because it's niche, but I think being Asian, I find it a bit more difficult because there are not as many Asian curators and gallerists versus Caucasian gallerists. So it's a visibility and representation. And when I say back to the Black community, they're really good at supporting each other and patrons supporting Black artists. I don't know if that's really the case for the Asian community, because you get Chinese collectors who are just collecting. I say this, you know, just not very experienced with it, but my perception is they're buying art to whatever raises in commodity, and so they're less focused about race, and they're supporting their own people. Of course, there are people who support, and when you put the queer narrative, it's so censored in China that I don't know how much you can balance that as well. And same with Vietnam, it's censored not as strict as in China, but the Black community, they are really good at supporting each other, and that's something I think that we can learn.
Yeah, I agree. I actually discussed something similar with quite a few people who are ESEAs as well. And I think we're not really loud in terms of the way we do things and who we are generally, and I think that's to do with our generational upbringing. We're kind of taught that you have to be modest, you have to be humble, you have to have humility, and I think sometimes it's hard for us to speak out in a group or like be loud and shout at the top of our lungs that we want equality and we want to be recognized. And I think it kind of filters through in various different industries. So I definitely agree. I don't know, apart from doing more sort of events like this and having more community activities and events and getting the awareness out there, because I also don't think we have to change who we are ourselves. So it's definitely a struggle, I think. And I was actually thinking about this over the last couple of days. So a lot of corporate entities, what they have is during, they have a Pride Week, not necessarily a Pride Month, and they do show queer art, but often, as you say, they're kind of either Caucasian or Black artists. And I think that's what I want to do as the next step, maybe for artists in particular, maybe to get these organizations to show more and to display more, and for people to hear these names and not be scared of saying our names. I think if you go by your Asian name, I think for many of us, when we say it, you almost see the fear in their faces, like, how do I say that? I don't want to pronounce it wrong. But maybe we just need to get it more out there so that they're used to it. And I guess the next question is, where do you draw your inspiration from in the art space? What inspires you for your art?
I think this is going very specifically into my practice. I think trained as a structural engineer for 6 years and then being in the industry for like another 17 years, like many years of your life doing engineering and understanding how materials work. So in my art practice, a lot of it is material-based, even paintings of how the texture and the color bounces off that, in sculptures of how the material is used, of using carbon fiber or concrete. In installation, so I did a stools installation with a Vietnamese collaborator in May, where we stacked white plastic stools to make a constellation of almost like the back streets of Vietnam or China, where we gathered to have beer. So, but there's an architectural and space aesthetics that is from the engineer training. So a lot of my influence of material and visual is from that part. The narrative is speaking to other people in the queer community, in the Asian community, to understand their story. And just like having this talk here, it's talking about our personal story, but I think it's just as important for everyone to share their experience as well. So when we were, so the topics of migration, I'm speaking specifically about my story and my family, how we got to Canada from Vietnam, but it's very relevant also to the migrant crisis now, and just wherever you are, having the queer voice suppression, of course, in our community, is much more taboo. But we're all living now in England, where we have the freedom of speech. So the topics of queer and being visible, I'm aware that there are other countries, and still in the British colony, where it's illegal to be gay or queer. So part of creating my own personal story and then making it more general and accessible to the wider queer community, not just Asian community, I think that's really important to have that be visible.
Mm-hmm. As the general public, what can we do to support you in that as well, as an artist and as someone who's willing to share?
I think after the talk, I was going to suggest that we just go around the room, if you're comfortable, to say, hi, my name is KB, I'm Chinese, Vietnamese, Canadian, I am an artist and a structural engineer. I think part of meeting people here is to have the future connection. So not just specifically to, of course, if you know people who like Asian, I would say Asian art, who like art that deals with migration and queer study, then please pass them to me. But just as important for each other here, like we're staying around, and sorry, even if you're Caucasian, you're looking at people who you're comfortable with, and it's really important to start building the network. So for a long time, I didn't feel comfortable saying that I'm Vietnamese. It's like, I don't know if you know the Joy Luck Club, and when Amy Tan went to China, she's like, oh, I felt like home. when I went to China, I felt like a foreigner because I don't speak Mandarin, I speak Cantonese. So Hong Kong was fine, and when I was in mainland China, I was like, who the hell are you? I tried sign language with them as well. I was like, where's the washroom? I tried the sign language, and they're like, what? This was 2007, maybe it's changed now. So when I went back to Vietnam in 2010, I felt much more at home with the, I wouldn't say language because I don't really speak it anymore. And it wasn't until this past Christmas where I learned that the migration story of ethnically Chinese people in Vietnam is a part of that Vietnamese diaspora. So I really can I really own to say that I am Vietnamese, Chinese, Canadian, and British. Yeah. So just going back, what I was trying to say is this Vietnamese narrative in my practice, it's really taken like a snowball in the last 8 to 10 months, and it's thanks a lot to Dan in the corner there, who's connected me to a lot of Vietnamese creatives in London. So I had an exhibition at the Migration Museum in Lewisham in April, and that for the first time there's like 50 people, and there were 2 solos at the same time with a British Indian artist, but it was really nice to meet Vietnamese creatives, queer or not queer, and their social circle. So it felt like, wow, this is like your tribe. And then when we did the Stoves installation with a French Vietnamese artist, Hoa, again we had a space where a lot of Vietnamese and Southeast Asian people came to gather, and it was like a bubble effect. So I think for the organization to look around now to start that communication to build future networks and events.
Yeah, I think actually in Lewisham is probably an ideal place for that as well, because I think as part of the refugee stats, I think it's like 20,000 Vietnamese refugees came to Deptford, Hackney, and nearby areas. Yeah. So you actually see a lot of Vietnamese restaurants and shops there, and then obviously there's goldsmiths nearby. So actually it's a very good crossing of the different communities.
Yeah. I mean, even seeing the faces, I don't know everyone, but I know that, this person should meet that person because I know that there are similarities where you can help each other in your respective careers and interests.
Yeah, and yesterday I saw your Instagram post where you posted in your art, and you had a very heartfelt description where you felt this drive and hunger to achieve success and achieve your goals. So what would you like to achieve in the next 5 to 10 years?
I call period, regardless of your race, gender. Kind of stumped. The ambition, of course, is to quit engineering and do art full time, but it's really difficult because just for example, if you sell something for £1,000, there's probably £200 from the material, and this is like excluding time. That piece that you sold for £1,000, there's like 5 pieces that are not sold, and there's probably another 2 or 3 pieces that get blanked out, and then you are the artist, social media, PR, blah blah blah, everything. So the time that you spend, where does it go? It's free, isn't it? And I think the struggle that I have is when you meet friends, because I'm still a structural engineer. Oh, can you do that for me for free? Or like give me a heavy discount. Like, you don't understand if you have to break away. So I would say support your creative friends. Like, pay them what they deserve, as though you were hiring someone to do your marketing or interior design for you.
Yeah.
I mean, unless they're doing it for free as a hobby, that's fine. But if someone is trying to transition into a career, we have to support the arts.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges as well is because of the price tag on it, it's kind of not as accessible to the everyday people who
Yeah.
are not earning a large sum of money. So the barrier of access is actually quite high, and then for people to understand and relate to the art as well, and the exposure that comes from it is an incredibly difficult industry.
Yeah.
So
It's a niche market because people save up to buy a Louis Vuitton bag. but because you can think of just buying something for IKEA, but then of course if you educate them, and of course there are art patrons, but it's definitely already a niche market, but the reward that you get from connecting with something that I'm not saying that you don't connect with your bag as well, but there's a different conversation when you have someone over and you're discussing that part of the intellect, which we're trying to open these doors, and this is part of educating people as well.
yeah, I think in your work, I don't know that much about art at all, but I see a lot of passion and strength and very strong emotions. And then I came across your performance art on white sheet, and how did you get into performance art?
I think that, I would say that I feel very comfortable in my skin, and it's a process that not everyone gets to, regardless of your sexuality or race. And for me, it was like being very outgoing as a kid, and then I shrunk into this, it's like the opposite. You don't move so much so that you don't get caught out being gay. And it wasn't until I came out so late as well, I was just like, fuck this, like I don't care anymore. So then the original personality came back. So it came from someone who was very self-conscious of their movement and hearing their voice on the answering machines. Like, God, of course this person is gay. How did my parents not know, right? So to being very comfortable in your skin, the performance aspect came from just going to the Venice Biennale in 2017 and seeing this series of photographs by a Hungarian photographer, performance artist, Tibor Hajjaz. He's a straight male, but he was taking photographs about the Russian suppression, and it was just something that triggered my mind to allowed me the agency and voice to do the set of work. So I went home. It's like the size. You move out your sofa. You have your friend with the iPhone 4. It was like a crap iPhone, and then with the sheet, and we just took some photographs and I edited, and then I pitched it to a curator who had an open call. And so, okay, here's the set of photographs. Oh, that's really good. Like, do it on the opening night. Like, what do you mean? Like, this is it? It's like, no, perform. Like, what? So it was like 2 months, and then I said, let me think about it. I'm not sure. Let me take 24 hours to think about this. And I went home. So of course, you're going to take up this opportunity. So it just, again, being self-taught, there are no rules to break because you don't know the rules. So you just do it, and it's been. Yeah, December 2017 was the first one, and I've done one or two every year since. So it's like a process and progress of learning and just experimenting.
Do you want to do more of it in the future?
I do, but it's access, because you need a venue and you need time to think about it. It's like if someone says, oh, you've done a hit album, can you do another one in 2 months? It's really hard to do that. So when you do paintings and sculptures, they're like little tracks. But to do a performance is like doing a whole album, so you don't have the mental space to do that. But also in the artist category, that I'm not getting paid for the performance. There's also a lot of time and money investment in that to build the portfolio. But yeah, I think if you had more opportunities to get paid to do more of these, then it would take off in another direction.
And what are you working on now? Do you have any upcoming shows and exhibitions?
Yeah, so there's a group show at The Contemporary in Mayfair opening September the 6th. Everyone's invited. So that's with 5 artists, and then so that's why I'm painting so heavily the last few weeks. And then there's an exhibition in Woodstock, which is outside of Oxford at the end of October. And that's a 3-person exhibition at a gallery space as well.
If you guys are free, Thank you, KB.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for everyone's attention and for being here as well.
And I think we should give KB a round of applause. And take up on this idea of actually introducing who we are and what do we do. And also, I also want to hear from people, if you have an idea as to like what you want to see more of, or what do you think is currently missing in this circle, let me know, let us know, let each other know, and then we can see if there's something that we can help each other with.
If you feel shy, just prefer to just say pass. Because
yeah.
And so now to come back to what Casey wants to do, I just wanted to point to the Welsh. Is anybody Welsh here? As well as... Sorry? How's Welsh?
Very bad.
Go on.
My Welsh grandfather we just had his funeral actually on Tuesday, so it was a nice reminder of our heritage.
Can you do it?
I really can't.
Mae'n pobl yn bai dilych ar gerdd. Some people are by Dilworth. Repeat after me. My problem. But it's just how I think, you know, just like how we had Ben sort of see something that's Scottish or Gaelic, kind of go, wow. I think here we've got a print by Ingrid Pollard, and it's Princess of Black Lesbian. This is from 1985. Ingrid Pollard has sort of started to get recognition now. Was sort of a nominated, Turner Prize nominated artist this year. So it just features the word lesbian in multiple languages. And so I think KC, to come back to your...
Just have my intro done. I have